Realm Reborn existing was that it had to come out on consoles. So the foundation of that game was meant to be run on a PlayStation 3. I actually played Final Fantasy XIV: The Realm Reborn on PlayStation 3 for a little while.
You know that the current version of the game doesn't even really run on console that much anymore?
It runs on PS4, PS5, and PC well, but they're
It
gonna cut
it
support to
does.
PS4.
There's a lot of people playing
PS4.
on console.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but the problem is on PS4, it's starting to die. Um,
Yes.
there
Because
was an event that literally would like.
I,
I don't know if you heard of the Vishojo, what's its face, guild in Final Fantasy. So they had a lot of members, or have a lot of members, right? And they decided to go to the Golden
Saucer.
Saucer. And the problem is, so then like the Final Fantasy devs like got wind of this, they increased the player limit with a patch. The problem is PS4 can't handle that many players. And all of a sudden in this event, everyone who wasn't playing on PC, I don't know if PS5 was out, basically couldn't play.
Well,
They couldn't join. Like if
it's
you like entered the area, it would crash, and you every time you logged in, it would crash.
they've had issues like that in the past where it's like, but it's not specifically the console's fault.
Yeah, it's
It's
not the console's fault at all. It wasn't made for like extensible things like an evolving MMO at all. So why
well,
would you base an evolving MMO on a console to start off with?
no,
You should
you
be doing
can
the reverse.
no, you can absolutely have an MMO on console. Final Fantasy 11 runs on
No,
PlayStation 2.
yeah, but you should rather have it run PC then console rather than console then PC.
The problem with the problem
Because
that Final
after
Fantasy
a few
14 is
years,
having
it's not going to work on
is
that console.
they never really mastered the foundation because of how much they had to crunch. The framework that supports all of Final Fantasy 14 was pretty much developed in a single year. Like there are several developer streams where they talk about, things that's going on with the game. Where they go, we're having an issue putting down Grand Company boxes, the inventories for guilds essentially. They couldn't really get it to work. So people would say, hey, you should add a box to this new city that you added. And they're like, we don't know how. Because every time we try and just do that, the servers crash and it's critical and we can't get it to work.
Yeah, that's
And
kind of like the stuff I was talking about. Like the base
they,
game is still trying to restrict it to PlayStation 3.
no, 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 no. It's not even that. Like, even on back when this was still at support for PlayStation 3, they couldn't get certain things to work because the framework just, they haven't mastered it.
They haven't mastered it, or it's because consoles are restrictive
No,
in
it
their
has nothing to
code.
do with consoles because remember this game also works on PC. So this is a specific game issue that they were having, and they're still having it. And Square Enix, the parent company, isn't giving them more funds, so they can't do things like expand the server size. They can't hire more staff. They can't work on that framework. They only have enough money to
Wait,
support the
are they
content they
not
currently have.
able or allowed to change that backend?
Yeah, no, they can't change their backend at all. They only just now got.
Oh,
They're only
I thought
just
they were
now.
trying to change that and wasn't. So they're not allowed to.
They only just
Like,
now got the okay to extend the servers a little bit with the next expansion that's coming out soon, actually in a couple of days, I think.
yeah, because generally the easiest. Wow. Just thinking from a developer point of view, the kind of spaghetti that must be sitting after that backend to make things work if you can't change the backend whenever you add something new.
All of the money that Final Fantasy XIV has generated went into Final Fantasy VII Remake.
That that's sad
That's Square
because
Enix.
that's a that's that's a shit ton of money.
Yep.
Final Fantasy VII should be like one of those things that like fucking hover over the ground and shit, you know?
But I
I
mean,
don't know if you know that meme. It's a very rare meme.
Final Fantasy VII is, isn't it still the most popular RPG game
It
in all of
definitely was for
history?
a while when it came out, but the remake, if it had that much money thrown into it, you know,
The
if there is
remake
some logic between money in equals money out, you know.
FF7 remake. So the remake is actually only the first part of the remake, and
Are you hitting
uh,
weird keys?
me? No. Am I?
Your
Oh,
character's doing funky shit on screen.
whoops. I am hitting weird keys. What's happening? Oh boy, what happened? Whoops. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah. Um. Also, there are bots in my chat. How do I ban these clowns?
I don't
Ban.
think you should report him because it will draw attention to your channel.
I'm
Just
not
saying.
worried about it.
But normally I report all bots.
Okay,
They
there we
send
go.
you an email now. Kind of cool. Like, we received your report. And then a while later, it's like, we have confirmed that this person is a bot. They have been removed.
But yeah, basically they're using Final Fantasy 14 as they're using the money that Final Fantasy 14 generates to fund Final Fantasy 7 remake and Final Fantasy 16, which luckily is being developed or is being produced by the same guy who's producing Final Fantasy 14. So it's not all bad. It's just pretty bad
Well, if it went all into 16, I wouldn't mind. But why 7? You know, it's
because
basically like evolving one MMO to another because from the code issues you explain, starting again is so much easier.
well, Final Fantasy 16 isn't going to be an MMO for one. It's a single player game.
Spiritual successor?
Possibly, we don't know yet. It's still very very early.
But then how far is Final Fantasy 14 going to go before they stop it? Do they have a planned stop? Have they passed the planned stop? What's happening? Do you know? Does anyone
Well,
know?
honestly, so Final Fantasy 14, according to the producer now, Yoshida, it does have arcs, and they're reaching the end of the first one with this next expansion. Now, how much is planned after that? They won't say. So,
Because, you know, when you're taking money and putting it in another development project, that kind of sounds like, you know, we have reached the end of this game.
yeah,
It's new game time, you know?
well, they've actually been doing it from the very beginning because so Square
Yeah, but they've
Enix,
still been bringing out more expansions, is the thing. Well, they're not expansions, but you know what I mean.
yeah, Square Enix basically said that they would not remake Final Fantasy VII until another mainline Final Fantasy game outperformed the original. And because Final Fantasy XIV is an MMO and is a miracle story, they were able to technically surpass the original Final Fantasy VII, and which is why the remake is happening now. So, yeah, they've been planning to take money from another project and put it into the remake of Final Fantasy VII since the 90s.
I don't know if that was really their plan. I think that's maybe what fans wanted.
I mean, the fans wanted a remake, but Square Enix as a company knew that in order to make something that the fans wouldn't hate, it would have to, it would have to be, you know, expensive.
That's still nice, though, if you think about it, how the fans actually drive a lot of the change in the Final Fantasy stuff.
It's not always for the better, though.
Yeah, I know, but it's still nice because the opposite of that is horrible and really horrible. Like, there's downsides to this, but the opposite of it doesn't really have good sides.
I'm at a point now where I'm actually kind of hoping that the Final Fantasy series ends.
What, all of them?
All of them. No more Final Fantasy games.
But why? It's
Because
optional at the end of the day. You don't have to play Final Fantasy.
I'm a die-hard Final Fantasy fan, and
But then why do you hope it ends?
because I want them to end while the series is still good and positive. I don't want it to become Fallout or World of Warcraft or the Assassin's Creed series. Because as it stands now,
I don't know. Like, Final Fantasy's development is a lot more methodical and takes a lot more time. Um, and also the fact that they were willing to even scrap the one because it was like not good enough. I don't think they'll have this issue where they'll like nosedive into the floor.
Final Fantasy 15, Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 13 2, Final Fantasy 13 Lightning Returns. I like those games personally, but those
Yeah,
games
I'm agreeing
are,
with Eris here. The quality has gone down.
yeah,
So would you prefer to not have those games at all?
yes.
Well,
Because
I've stopped playing them, so it doesn't matter to me one way or the other.
it's like
So you
this.
would have preferred it already died after 10?
No, 12 was good. Oh, I like 13,
When
so
did
I'm
10.2 come out?
2 years after 10. I like 10 too as well.
Oh, a lot of people didn't like 10.2.
Yeah, I know. But that's the thing, though, right? You either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself to become the villain. And when it comes to Final Fantasy, I would much rather it die as the most superior RPG series in all of gaming history than see the largest, most popular RPG series in all of history become total garbage and a joke, which is where it's currently heading, unfortunately.
Mm. See, from my point of view, that's a little bit weird because, like, let's say after 12 or something, they did stop, right? They're like, ah,
Final
yes, we're the best, we're stopping here.
that guess what? If you like RPGs, you would be required by pretty much all laws of gaming to go play the entire Final Fantasy series. It's only 12 games.
Or some other company develops something really amazing, and in 10 years' time, the new generation is like, Final Fantasy, what's that?
Guess
Oh, I
what?
heard about that.
That's a win-win situation because now we have this new thing that is so good in
The
quality.
new thing can happen regardless, though. The fact is that Final Fantasy could then, even though it stops at its best, it disappears.
Well, I don't want that.
That's the thing. If they're still alive and making bad games, the old games that are really good are still heard about.
Yeah,
But if
but
they stop, they disappear. Like,
they
properly disappear.
they don't though. Like, so
They
here's the
do.
thing. Nobody
History
nobody
does that often.
nobody wants to play nobody wants to start a series that ends badly. I started watching Game of Thrones, loved it. Heard about the ending, didn't watch the ending. Nobody's going to look at the 12 good Final Fantasy games and ignore the
Yeah,
20
but they're
bad
not
ones.
really a series. They are
Which is
still independent games with their own stories.
nobody who doesn't play the Final Fantasy series knows that.
Yeah, but you tell them that. They wouldn't know about the game at all if you didn't tell them about it.
I'm not going to be around to tell the future of humanity how awesome the Final Fantasy series is.
Yeah, but if the game stopped, no one would.
Fluffy, by that logic, nobody would still be waiting for Half-Life 3. Yet here we are.
Yeah, but Valve still exists.
I'm not saying
Yeah,
I'm
you
not
didn't
I never said
And
that
they
say
did
Square
Square
Enix
Enix
release
has
would
to go
Half-Life
away.
Alyx. and they
That's
did
not Half-Life 3.
they did a thing.
Think
Fuck,
about
I
it
need
like
to play
this.
that game. When are you gonna come here? Because I want to spoil this.
Think
Yeah.
of
Valve's methodology is weird. It's weird. So I won't spoil anything, but it's weird. But you need to like get your ass over here, play through Alex, and be like,
never got into Half-Life, but Square Enix puts out let's see, what's some other
Well,
game that they put out?
hold up. You never got into Half-Life,
No,
like
I
at all.
played
yeah, and you still
Half-Life.
think someone's gonna be around to tell you if the game just stops. If like they can't stop making the games, the old big games just disappear. And also, you're forgetting one thing. Even if they make like 5 bad games, the next game could be brilliant, and people will suddenly forget about all the bad games.
No, that's not how that works. The
No,
previous
that
game
works.
always pays the next game always pays the price of the previous game's mistakes. Always. Always, always, always. But
That
Square
doesn't
Enix
quite work like that.
Square Enix puts out
It
a
does,
bunch of
though.
different RPG
Not quite,
series.
because you have to think of the way that Microsoft develops things, which is very interesting, that always has a fail and then a good one.
That's Microsoft. That's completely different.
That's an operating system, not a game. Because see, the problem there is you have to get a new Windows operating system. You don't have a choice. With games, you lose market share if your games are bad. Like if you've got a couple of great games, you get a lot more players, and they come in and they enjoy the series. Then you put out a bad game, and a lot of those players just fuck off, and they don't look at your next installments.
Yeah, like I didn't like Fallout 4 when Fallout 86 or whatever that crap was called
76.
got announced. I was like, I'm not playing that. And
Yeah,
then
but
that game turned
76
out to
was also
be,
bad.
guess
Yeah,
what?
exactly.
If it was good, though, people would play it.
Not
I wasn't.
necessarily. I'm not even looking at their Elder Scrolls 6, whatever they're putting out.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
don't care.
I'm not looking forward to Starfield. I was never going to play Fallout 86, 76, whatever, because of
Yeah.
how burned I was on Fallout 4. When Final Fantasy 14 1.0 was a mess, when they announced Fallout, or not, I'm now thinking of Fallout, when they announced Final Fantasy 14 A Realm Reborn, I wasn't going to play it. The only reason I did is because they offered it to me for free for a limited time, and I was like, I'll laugh at your attempt to save this burning trash fire, and then it was good. But if Square Enix stops making Final Fantasy games, think about it. They have tons of other RPGs that they can do. It doesn't have to be Final Fantasy.
But what if those crash and burn?
Then they just move on to something else.
And so you're okay with them changing the name of the game and it still being trash, as long as the one with the name you like doesn't end up with a trash version. Because that's essentially what will happen
That's
at
fine.
some point.
Because, I mean, you say that, but you kind of make it sound like that, and I see where you're going, but
Because
you know,
eventually it's going to be Square Enix games are bad. You know?
well, hey, don't.
You see what I mean? That's why whenever I look at games, I try to look at the developer. And currently, I'd say Square Enix is like in a good place to make good games. So they should be making games.
So
if those games don't end up good, there's still a developer in a good place to make good games. You know?
I disagree, kind of, in that, because Square Enix also puts out a bunch of trash, like that Avengers game. Like I don't look at it as Square
but of
Enix
course
games
they're
are
going to
good.
produce bad things, but they have the potential for producing good things. Whereas a lot of developers are just no.
And that's what I want. I want them to produce good games, but I
Yes,
don't
which
want them
means
to
you have
ruin.
keep producing games, even if trash ones come out.
That's fine. Let them keep producing games. Just don't make them
And
Final
that's
Fantasy
why
games.
I'm saying it's okay to have them produce more Final Fantasy games, even if trash ones come out, because they can still produce good Final Fantasy games.
I don't want good. Listen.
Yeah, but no, the bad Final Fantasy games then ruin the name of the Final Fantasy series. There is that association just on the name.
Yeah, but it's purely just a name association to a fraction of the greater whole. You know, the
You,
same developers are producing a whole bunch of other games.
Yes, but to a lot of people, that's a strong association.
yeah,
Like a massive part of the market will
But
go,
that's also
this
another
Final
thing.
Fantasy was bad. I'm
In
not
10
touching
years'
another Final
time,
Fantasy.
you want to still have Final Fantasy have a great name.
yes,
That's a new generation. That's like 2 new generations almost.
yeah.
They're not going to have the same association. Their
That's
association is going to be whatever the latest game is. And that's it.
Yeah, and if that's bad, then
yeah,
But if it's good,
like it is. Like there are a lot
that's
of
the thing.
people. There are a lot of people, young people, who have only played Final Fantasy 14 and Final Fantasy 15. That's a problem. That's a big, big problem. Yes, Final Fantasy 14 is doing fantastic and everybody loves it. Final Fantasy 15, I don't like hearing young people go, the Final Fantasy series. Like, no, wait, young child, you don't know. Go back and play Final Fantasy 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 8.
What about 1 and
hold up,
2?
what happened to 1 and 2?
Play 1, I don't, 2,
Yeah,
No,
you
that,
just
those are not
freaking
great,
screwed up
actually.
your own thing. Because I was also going to say, but what if you were so far back in the generation that you played one of the early games that wasn't good, and therefore everything after that you were just like Final Fantasy,
My first Final
But
Fantasy
those were
game,
mostly not good because of the limitations of hardware at the time.
my first Final
Even
Fantasy game
7 was heavily limited.
yeah, 7 was rough. My first Final Fantasy game was actually 8. I loved it.
Well, I
It was
guess, okay,
fantastic.
obviously if you played it at the time, then
I
it's
went
kind of
back
brilliant.
and
Like
played the
everyone
ones that
remembers
came
Black
before it.
Mage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But okay, so
Like if I say Black Mage, you have a picture in your head.
right.
I have
That's
a
the
few.
thing.
But people who only played Final Fantasy 15, they hear Black Mage, they don't know.
Yeah, but if Final Fantasy didn't exist, they'd still not know.
Well, Final Fantasy would still exist. There wouldn't be boy band Final Fantasies on road trips to drag the name through the mud. See
Yeah,
what I'm
but the
saying?
name would like disappear is the thing I'm saying.
It wouldn't
Like
disappear.
at least now playing Final Fantasy 15, some diehard Final Fantasy fan in there is going to say, "Oh, by the way, you need to try this." And because they're playing Final Fantasy 15, even if it's not that great, they'll be like, "Wait, there's better like this."
There's not always going to be diehard fans around. Like, okay, take what's an old movie series that people like?
Die
Lord of the
Hard.
Rings. Take Lord of the Rings. There's no more Lord of the Rings movies. All right.
Okay, so
People,
would you prefer something like Die Hard then, actually?
is Die Hard over? They stopped making those, right?
Yes, but on purpose.
Good. Those. I remember the last Die Hard movie being pretty all right.
Yeah, that was the plan.
Good. Yeah, that's fine.
Like, would you actually prefer that? Because obviously the issue with Die Hard is Bruce Willis is human and he gets old.
Yeah.
So they can't keep making Die Hard movies. And
Good.
everyone loves, okay,
It's
all
actually
Die
a
Hard.
similar thing with games though, because your lead story writers and all that they pass on and they
Yeah, but
you
at
get
the
new story writers.
moment,
It becomes different.
their team is good and vibrant.
Yeah.
So at the moment, I don't
Stop.
want it to die.
I don't think. Stop. Because it's like
I'm
this
okay
with
the
the Star
current
Wars.
team making bad movies. Like I'm okay with Bruce Willis making a bad Die Hard movie.
I would have much rather Star Wars end at the end of the prequel trilogy than continue on and become what it is now.
Yeah, but that is such a complete change of everything, though.
It's the same thing with Final Fantasy.
That's exactly what he's worried about with Final Fantasy, and
I
I
want
can't
Final
say I
Fantasy.
disagree.
But it hasn't happened yet. Or are you saying that the current Final
but it
Fantasy
can
14?
happen.
It will happen
What's
eventually.
his name? Are you saying
Naoki
you don't
Yoshida.
like him?
I do like him.
What, Yoshi P?
Yeah.
Yeah, Yoshi P. Why did I forget Yoshi P? But yeah,
I don't know how you forgot Yoshi P. Okay, but what about if
So-
when Yoshi P dies,
then they can stop.
or he moves on to another project?
He's
Then
moving.
can
only
stop.
they're allowed to
He's
stop.
already moving on to another project he was working on.
Yeah,
Final
I'd
Fantasy
rather
16.
base things on the developers than like if Yoshi P develops a bad game, that is okay. Because he'll make a better game afterwards, eventually, right?
If Yoshi P.
But Square Enix isn't like Square Enix or let's say Final Fantasy, at the moment is kind of tied to Yoshi P
If
until a prodigy replaces him.
If
maybe
Yoshi
not.
if Yoshi P were to make Trials of Mana 4 and it's a bad game, that's fine. If Yoshi P makes a Trials of Mana 4 and it's a good game, that's fine. Good for him. It doesn't have to be Final Fantasy.
So you won't even let Yoshi P make another Final Fantasy game because it could be bad.
I would prefer him not make another Final Fantasy game. And even he himself has said, man, I really wish I could go and make other things. He wants to try
Yeah,
something
because
that
there's
isn't
only
Final
so
Fantasy.
much you can take of one thing. You get
I
burned out.
guess. But now we're detracting from the point. Like,
All I'm saying is
I still think it's okay for them to try and make another game even if it's bad.
a series does not have to go on forever. A series shouldn't go on
Yeah.
forever. A series cannot maintain its level of quality forever, and I want
But
Final
basically, are
Fantasy
you
to
saying that
end.
you think now is the time?
Yeah. Now is most definitely the time.
Yeah,
It
I would
is
say if Yoshi P was passionate and wanted to make another Final Fantasy, it would be fine for me.
I think he
But
maybe
if
is,
he's looking
but
at
he's also scared because I don't think he intended to become the sort of patron of Final Fantasy that he has become. And
he's
he's
not
kind of scared about screwing up Final Fantasy.
Yoshi P
I
isn't the
don't think so. I
isn't
think
the
it's more a case
patron.
of he wants to explore new things,
Yeah.
or different things.
And he understands that new things don't always pay off. And he
But
himself
also,
doesn't
from
want
my
to be the
point of view, looking at Final Fantasy, it's just really a name attached to a bunch of games because the games don't have that much in common with each other. So there is still a lot you can do in a Final Fantasy game.
I don't know how hardcore of a fan you are, but there's so much of Final Fantasy that has been there since game 1 that like every time they announce a new Final Fantasy game, I get increasingly and more increasingly scared. Like I want Final Fantasy as a series to end at 16. Let that be the last game. Go make Trials of Mana, go make Dragon Quest, go make what was that 3DS game that got ported recently? Um, just stop making Final Fantasy games. There's other you can use all of that creativity and all of that talent to do something else.
But the thing is, like, what is this thread? Because yes, obviously there's some like lore aspects that have like become solidified throughout Final Fantasy games, right?
It's
It's like this thread. And
it's a-
now you're saying you're worried about that either changing so that it's not the same as all the previous ones,
not that it's not
or
the
becoming
same.
something new but still having the same name as if it was part of.
It's making what is because you can very much take something and ruin it by continuing to add it and reuse it the way that they have been doing it. Like
But
honestly,
does it have to?
eventually,
No, no, I mean, like, no, in Final Fantasy, like, if I wanted to make a Final Fantasy game, what do I have to abide by? What can I not do?
there is most definitely a set of rules for the Final Fantasy series.
Like, obviously, it's an RPG, it's not an FPS. But, like,
Have you ever
what are my
played?
actual limits?
Have you ever played a Final Fantasy game that didn't have an item called a potion in it? No, you
Yeah, but
haven't.
that's also an RPG thing.
What about
Uh,
chocobos? What about
Have Chocobos
summons?
actually been in all of them?
yes, even
Yeah.
in
Or did they only come out in a certain one and then just stay from then on?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they've been in all of them.
From one as well.
Yeah, it's a staple. Final
Bahamut's
Fantasy.
been in almost all of them as well,
hmm
Where
So
did
in one
Bahamut
form or
come
another.
from? Is my
item
question.
names, monster names, they're signature things that are
Because Bahamut can't be licensed. It's not a thing they invented.
the name can't
You
be
talking about where
licensed.
it came from, mythologically speaking?
Because I know the mythological Bahamut from Western societies. But Japan seems to have its own version of Bahamut that appears in like Final Fantasy and other games from Eastern countries.
It's just a name that
Where
they've
did that
taken.
come from? Or
It's really
did
just a name
Final
that they've taken.
Fantasy take the word Bahamut from Western and just make their own thing, and then other people copied them?
Yeah, they just made their own thing. It's
That.
similar to the enemy Marlboro. The Marlboro. It's actually just a brand of cigarette.
Well, I know that, but I didn't know that that's where they took the name from.
Yeah. So
Was that accidental?
No, they had a developer who smoked all the time in the office, and
That's where the bad breath debuff comes from.
Exactly. And it is a staple of the Final Fantasy series. You see?
I'm now not sure if that's very creative or unhealthy. It's like, we don't like this guy. I know what we can do.
In fact, I don't know if I still have it, if I can still find it, but there used to be when they were running a lot of like anti-smoking campaigns, one of them was literally just the enemy Marlboro from the Final Fantasy series casting bad breath, and it's like smoking will make you this. Don't stop smoking. You see? So,
Oh, that's realistic.
Don't stop.
oh, I mean,
I mean, that's actually a realistic smoking campaign, because the ones we get here are unrealistic.
I mean, it's not going to turn you into a green plant thing with tentacles and make you.
No, but it will make your breath like. Even if you're a smoker and you stop smoking, the moment you like haven't smoked for a while and you like a person who's a smoker walks past you, you half die from the smell. You can't stand it. Like, you actually have to be smoking in order to be able to handle the smell. It is a thing. It is bad.
Probably just brush their teeth. But
so that's a realistic campaign, you know, to say that it's like unworldly bad breath.
But back to the Final Fantasy thing. They have Bravely Default, right? It's a series of RPGs called Bravely Default. They're kind of just Final Fantasy games, but they're not Final Fantasy games. They use a lot of monster names, item names, skill and move names, but it's not a Final Fantasy game. Just
so maybe
do
a little
that.
bit of evolution would be a good thing. So they decide, okay, we want to make a change in direction, and we want to solidify this and also make our fan base happy that we're not screwing up Final Fantasy. And they like decide, okay, so we'll keep a little bit of it by calling it, I don't know, continual fantasy. And then they'll make continual fantasy games. Would that make you happy?
They could make Bravely Default. If you look at
like I mean, like, you know, like our development team, because obviously if it's a development team, it's going to end up something similar.
Mm-hmm.
But to break away, you'd prefer that sort of like,
yeah,
like a rebranding, but not a rebranding, because the old ones will still be called Final Fantasy.
Yeah. And that's literally what they did with Bravely Default. It's basically Final Fantasy 3 with a bunch of new ideas and new things that aren't Final Fantasy in it. And it's fantastic. It's a great game.
That is what you should tell people, I think. Because initially when you were just like, yeah, they mustn't make any more Final Fantasy games, it's like, eh? But I feel like they should go through some sort of restructure, rebranding thing and make a new thing.
Yeah, that's what I want. I want them to make a new
killing
thing.
the old thing.
Yeah, it's not about killing.
Because your initial comment definitely sounds like kill Final Fantasy.
No, don't kill it. Just stop making them.
And bury it so we can remember it with a tombstone.
Just because they stop making games in a series doesn't mean that like they're killing it. And I don't want to use the term rebranding because I don't want them to all of a sudden change, like, I don't want them to go back and start calling Final Fantasy 1 through 16 Bravely Default or anything like that, you know?
No. Rebranding doesn't change the old. It's like a forward move.
But yeah, just don't.
Like a forward move thing.
So if they're going to try something new and, you know, explore new ideas and stuff, which they should be doing, don't do it using the Final Fantasy name. Just literally do anything else.
Yeah, I get you now. you can make a nice video explaining this to people out of this.
I'm
Maybe
actually going to trim
Maybe
this, and
Like
I'm going
3
to.
hours long to get to this point.
I don't think you could explain it in less.
I'm
Could you?
going to trim this section of the stream and upload it as a YouTube video. Because I can do that.
Because, like, obviously someone who's just started Final Fantasy needs to also gain the perspective of why. Because also something suddenly just ending from the perspective of someone who's only played the last game in the series, and then it ends is like, oh, it died. Must have been bad.
No,
And
that's
they'll
wrong.
never go backwards.
That's wrong.
Like-
Because people who have only played the most recent
Yeah,
Final
but that's
Fantasy,
the thing, is people will come to, like, the wrong conclusion.
they won't though. Not with Final Fantasy, because all of the Final Fantasy games have these handy little numbers on them. So when somebody plays Final Fantasy 16, they're gonna be like, "Damn, there's 16 of these things? What?"
Okay, but that's not helping your logic, because if
Yeah,
there's like
people work on
24
a
of
forward
them,
progression system of understanding where 16 must be the best game. That is people's default logic, which is wrong, but it's a case of they're not likely to go backwards.
That's
Like,
that is
I don't
as a
think so.
unfortunately the
general
case, yes.
rule, people rarely go backwards. Like, you have to convince people to play older games.
So by your logic, the last game in any season or in any series is the best game of that series?
No. If someone just became 18 years old or something,
Mm-hmm.
and their first Final Fantasy game is 16,
Mm-hmm.
it's highly unlikely they will ever play the previous games.
If there's no Final Fantasy 17 and they really like Final Fantasy 16, they're gonna go back and play another Final Fantasy game. Whether or not
But
they
16
like
would
that,
have to be really good, wouldn't it?
yeah, it would.
Like, they'd have to become a diehard fan in that one game
Yeah,
in
it
order
would.
for them to go back. It's
Just
just
like
kind of how people are in general. They never really,
Yeah,
people just don't go backwards.
I can count on one hand the number of times I've gone back for a series of games, and it's actually never really worked out well.
Yeah, I've
Um,
bought games going backwards and never played them. Like, not even attempted them.
wow, that's
Like, my first Final
actually
Fantasy I
sad.
played was 8.
Mine too. And I went back and I played 1 through 7.
And people say 7 is so much better, and I still don't have the compulsion to play it. 'Cause
I mean,
Yeah.
that's unfortunate. I think that you should play 7. I think that you should play 6. 3 is fantastic. I like 6. I like 6 probably second best to 8. But yeah, when I got my hands on Final Fantasy 8, I was
But
so
that is a rare thing, though. Like,
I was
that is something
so
that you must realize, is that most people will never go backwards.
I was so blown away with the music and the writing and everything that was going on that I was like, absolutely, I'll go back and play those old games. Is it rare? Sure. But
Oh, but what did you think about 8? Because for a long
loved
time,
it.
people were like, 8 is the worst one in the franchise.
They're idiots. They're actually stupid. Final Fantasy 2 has not gone anywhere. I think Final Fantasy 8 is fantastic, and
Final Fantasy 8, I think, did something very different at the time. Like, if 8 was the latest game, those cinematics were amazing.
not only that, Final Fantasy 8 is is the only classic Final Fantasy to actively counter the problem of magic being overpowered. Like
With
everybody,
physical weapons that would just, like...
well,
yeah.
no, because you equip magic to your stats in order to get stronger, and if you use that magic, then your stats go down. So rather than chug a bunch of ethers and spam
that
magic,
thing. Yeah. I was actually just thinking of Ultima, and then the moment I thought of Ultima, I thought, yeah, I was collecting those.
yeah,
So basically, the previous issue would be people would have just taken the best spell and kept using it. But
Yeah.
because of the way that Final Fantasy forced you to equip it and the number of them that you had,
you had to choose between whether or not using the spell was worth.
yeah, it's like, this is the best spell. you can keep its stats if you don't cast it, or cast it for its awesome damage.
And it meant that when you did use it for its awesome damage, it was like serious. You're like, no, this is worth it. I'm making a conscious decision to use this spell on an enemy that I feel deserves it, instead of, well, I'll just use this spell and I'll buy some ethers when I'm at the shop next. It is the only PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy to have any sort of mechanic to persuade players to think about what they're doing.
It's like an ammo. It's very clever.
Yeah.
Like in games that are balanced, where you have like the BFG, sort of the big gun that can kill everything, and then to make sure it's balanced, there's very little ammo.
Exactly.
Okay, but that has a similar problem that I was just about to bring up, because then you never use it for fear of using it at a time that it's not worth it. Like you're at a boss fight and I can probably get through using just melee attacks or
But that's
using
still a
just
legitimate
my
strategy
SMG.
because it gives you stats.
Yeah, but then you get to the end of the game and you've never used it like
But that's
more
fine,
than twice.
because okay, so it's like ammo, right? If you have to draw it from an enemy, so you draw the spell from the enemy, and then you
But
gain a number of them, like ammo.
a lot of people don't know.
If you equip that spell to your character, you gain stats from it in relation to the amount you have.
Because then you're
So
never
if you
using it
spent
at
the
all,
whole
period.
game never using it and just stocking them up, you'd have so many stats from it, it would be insane. So you're still actually using it, just in a different way.
And not only that, a lot of people were under the impression that there was like a limited amount of a spell, which isn't the case at all. You can actually convert items that you get into magic to increase the stack. So you use it, and it's not like an immediate debuff to your stats. And it's certainly not permanent. It doesn't have to be. It just means that if you go around spamming the spell that you have equipped to your strength, then your strength is going to over time get weaker. So don't spam it. Only use it when you need to. Kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, and it's also like it's difficult. That was a difficult one to get. So it was a case of
Yeah, Ultima, you had to work to get Ultima. And it wasn't necessarily it wasn't necessarily a system to make you never use magic. It was just something to say, hey,
you
are
had
you
to
really
actually like consider it.
Are you really going to cast Ultima on?
But you could also it removed that thing of, oh, all you have to do is get this spell and then you win the game with the spell.
Yeah.
That was definitely not a thing. You could do that. You could like defeat every boss with that spell, but that would require you spending a massive amount of time farming the spell.
It wasn't even
which
like
would
using
change
it.
the game play a lot.
It wasn't even like
It'd be
bosses.
weird.
Like you could still use spells on bosses as much as you pretty much wanted, but if you got into a random encounter with a baby cactuar, are you really going to cast the ultimate spell on it? Why? Why would you do something so overkill? That's stupid. And we're going to punish you for doing
Deserves to
that.
die. Deserves to die a fiery death.
Well,
then
actually,
kill it with
Cactuar
fire.
in Final Fantasy VIII was hardcore.
Well, the
hard
King
to kill.
Cactuar was. God, the King Cactuar.
Now, Cactuar in Final Fantasy VIII had like this seriously rare spawn, and the thing would do its thing where it would either instantly run away or one-shot someone.
Yeah, I never played 8, but those were awful annoying in 10. Like they just ran the instant they saw you.
There's a spot in Final Fantasy
Bad
VIII where they have a
example,
100%
like
spawn
the 8
rate.
Cactuar was like horrible.
It
was
weren't that bad.
Horrible.
So there's special summons that weren't menu based, and one of them was you got from the King Cactuar, and you had to go to this specific spot on the island to farm. I think it's 6 or 7 of them, and then once you kill 7 of them, then the king spawns, and if you defeat him, then you got a secret summon.
Wait, was the secret summon the guy on the horse, or was that a different one?
That's a different one.
The guy on the horse was also some secret summon that I had.
Odin?
I can never remember how I would get it, but I managed to get it twice. Do you know the guy on the horse? Basically, what would happen is if your party would be wiped and you had this guy, he would save you. He would just appear, one-shot the enemy, and you guys would be alive.
Guy on the horse. I think you're probably just thinking of. Hold on.
He wasn't a summon. You couldn't summon him.
Oh, he was
You
random.
had to
Yeah.
get him in a specific way.
That's
And
Odin.
once you got him, there was a chance that he would appear and save you.
Yeah, Odin and Eden was a special one. Yeah, because Odin was not a menu summon. He was one of the secret ones.
So how did you activate Cactuar guy then?
Cactuar, I was wrong. Cactuar was he's an actual GF Guardian Force summon that you unlock. It's Cactuar, Tonberry, and Eden. But yeah.
Yeah, Odin was very interesting. I think that's the guy on the horse.
Yeah, he's
because Odin
rides a
Sleipnir.
horse.
It sounds mythologically correct. Even though Sleipnir is technically a spawn of Loki. It's weird, but it works.
But yeah, Final Fantasy VIII is fantastic. I wish more people would.
Yeah, they were trying stuff out, I think. They were like, cinematics, and they made a lot of cinematics, and let's make a new this and a new that, and some interesting stuff, and a lot of that ended up good. Like, the card game is the one they use in 14.
Yep.
Triple Triad.
Yeah, Triple Triad.
What scared a lot of people away from 8 is this idea that you had to farm magic. And it's because those people didn't know about all of the different ways that you could get magic. Like, you could turn cards from Triple Triad into magic. You could turn items into magic on top of drawing it from monsters. What I would do is
the first GF you get could turn things into cards. And I'd spend so much time doing that.
But a lot of the people who don't know any better say that you have to spend so much time in random battles drawing magic from monsters. And I'm like, no,
that was my
don't have to do that.
Way of getting it.
It's the worst way to get magic. It's there as an option, but you're really not intended to get magic in high quantities that way.
Yeah, no, because a lot of the times it would be risky and you could end up just losing more than you gain or dying or bleh.
So if more people just knew about the systems that the game was, trying to get them to use and utilize, they'd like it more, but.
Yeah, that was a different era. That was like pre-tutorial era, I feel. Like the game sort of puts you there, and it's like NPCs would tell you this and that, but it's not really current generation friendly at all.
Yeah, and they tell you about like the basics, but they expect you to put all of the different things they teach you about together yourself. Like, I had a friend.
Yeah, that was definitely the time where games like Morrowind came out, where it's like, you have a brain, use it.
I had a friend who
NPCs tell you stuff, figure it out.
He never changed or assigned his GF, his guardians, his summons, skills to learn. You know that menu where you can choose what you want them to learn next? Like what skill? Like the card ability that you described?
Yeah, but then, is it even usable?
Yeah, you can beat the entire game and never go into that menu after the tutorial. So there are a ton of abilities that he just didn't get because he was unlocking them in a row. Like once you learn one, it automatically just goes to the next thing, and he beat the entire game like that.
Oh, okay, so it still actually learns things. It's not like it doesn't learn anything at all.
Yeah, it does, but you have to, if you don't assign it to learn different things, then it just goes down the list. And you don't.
That would be weird. I don't know what that would end up as, but it's possible.
Yeah,
but something else that's interesting in Final Fantasies, do you know how the difficulty is worked out? You know you can't choose the difficulty at the start?
Yeah.
So you know how the difficulty is worked out, because there is actually a difficulty in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I actually didn't know about that. fucking accidentally played it on hardcore the first time. Damn, that was hard. That's also something that was very interesting because that's completely different to, like, if you were to give Final Fantasy VIII to someone now, they're going to try max out their characters and then go into battle.
Those poor fools. So poor fools. They
Do you know what
they
we're talking about, Pi?
they see big number
Not
and
the
they go,
foggiest.
So in Final Fantasy VIII, they did something really, really, really interesting. The higher level you are, the harder the game is. So if you stay low
Right.
level, the whole game all the way through is easy. But if you get to high level at the start fighting T-Rexes, and then go through the whole game like that, it'll be hard mode.
yeah. Essentially, the way they set monsters to scale based off of player level. So
Every monster.
oh
Boss.
my gosh. You can run
Everything.
into a wasp at the beginning of the game, and if you're level 99, guess what? You're in for a rough time. Or possibly a
Yeah.
rough time.
So guess how I played the game the first time I played? Because they don't tell you this at all.
You can
You know,
beat
you
that
get
entire
the
game
starting
T-Rexes at the start of the game
at level 1, I think.
in that, you know, inside that town that eventually floats off the ground.
Yeah, the garden, your school.
Yeah, the garden where you get the first T-Rex, and you could keep respawning them there if you just kept running around long enough.
Yeah.
So someone like power level there in their first game until they were like high level, and they're like, cool, let's run outside, and the game was so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a.
It was an interesting game. Holy fuck. It was so
see.
hard.
So, yeah. Well, let me see. There's a more clear description for what that was. Gosh, I just had it. There's actually a formula that all of the enemies go by. Shoot, where is it?
But the formula is basically more geared towards benefiting the enemies.
Yeah, the enemy's level is normally not fixed and depends on the active party member's current levels, according to the following formula. Base level equal floor, average level of active party. Level difference equal floor, base level plus 5. So, essentially, all of the enemies and bosses could be 5 levels higher than anyone in your party at one time. So, if you're level 100, the enemies could be level 105.
Yeah. So my first game I screwed up because I kinda like leveled so much that the final boss was just not, or one of the bosses was just not killable at all.
You can
They
still
were too
kill them.
powerful. It was insane. Like, it was insane. Does Ultima work against the final boss, by the way?
Ultima does, yes.
Okay. So then I broke the game.
There is
They
there's
were
actually
immune to all elemental effects.
there's actually a spell more powerful than Ultima though.
Demi, sometimes.
No.
Demi is sometimes more powerful because it's something like it does half health damage. So if they have a massive health pool, it's insane.
There's a
Is it
character.
before?
There's a character in Final Fantasy VIII named Selphie. You remember her? The girl with the nunchucks?
Yeah?
Do you remember her limit break? It's called Slot Machine or Slot. Basically, any magic that she had equipped to her, it would randomly scroll through, and you could cast it in for free, a set amount of times, depending on basically RNG. She's really powerful if you build her for
Wait.
magic.
She can. It scrolls through what equipped to her, weapon or spell.
Magic.
So it could cost Ultima 999 times.
I think the limit was like 4 or 5. But with her, she's the only character in the entire Final Fantasy series to get this spell. And it has I think it's like a 2% chance to pop up. It's called the End.
Oh, so there's spells. It's any spell in the game, not necessarily spells you have.
It's spells that she has plus this one.
Oh.
The End is, let's see,
Someone else had the end.
1 in 256 chance of popping up when she uses her limit break, and she can only use it in her limit break. And it had its own system for how it worked. It's based off of something called the crisis level. And it will instantly kill any enemy in the game.
Oh, so it's better than... Is the other one Doom?
Doom?
There was another spell where if it was... It's like a spell that can be cast, but not easily. And it had a low chance of applying a debuff. But if it did apply the debuff, it would be like a set number of turns, and that thing dies.
Yeah. But there are a lot of enemies were
Doom or
immune to
something.
Doom. Yeah, it's
This
Doom.
is better than Doom.
Yes, it's definitely better than Doom because a lot of enemies are immune to Doom. So like there are enemies and bosses that no matter what will never be under the effects of Doom.
Because it's a debuff.
It's
And
actually
they just have flat debuff immunity.
a lot of enemies in the Final Fantasy series are immune to Doom because it's a cheap move. It's
Well, I think
STL.
originally Doom was not actually supposed to be something you could cast. It would just be something like enemies could cast it, but you could reflect it.
Yeah, that's true.
I think in Final Fantasy VIII you couldn't cast Doom either, but you could reflect it.
No, it's an ability.
Wait,
Diablos
someone
learns
had
it.
Doom? Wait, you could suck Doom from an enemy? I don't
No,
know if you could do
it's
that.
it's an ability.
Wait, it's an ability, not a spell?
Yes,
Ah.
Diablos can learn it, and you cast it, and there's no limit.
Oh, Diablos had Doom. True.
Yep. You know Diablos
Yes,
from
used
Final
it
Fantasy
then.
XIV.
Much, because it took too long or just kept failing to apply.
Yeah,
I'm
because
looking
I like
into the
Demi
end.
as my first skill. I just loved that animation. That was my coolest GF, was just... wait, is Demi cast by Demi, or is Demi cast by someone else?
was Demi a spell or an ability?
It was a GF thing.
Oh
The guy
no.
pops up and the whole place turns black and he makes this black sphere and squashes them with it.
Yeah, that's Diablos'. That's his summon attack. When you actually summon Diablos, that's what he does. But Demi is actually wasn't there?
Yeah, that his attack works like Demi, that thing.
Yeah.
You'll notice if the guy has like 5 HP or something, that thing starts doing like 2.5 damage.
Yeah, because you can't kill enemies with Demi.
Yeah, but his big ass Murav Dingus summon does the same.
Yeah.
It applies it's like a more powerful version but applies to the same rules kind of thing. It's very similar. I just call it Demi as well.
It's just
I never used the spell, I used to summon Dingus.
you divide the enemy's HP by some value.
I just love that animation.
They
I hated
reused
Quetzalcoatl for some reason.
because our
Can't
animation was
remember why.
crazy long. It took forever.
What took forever?
Her attack animation.
Quetzalcoatl's.
Yeah. Lightning strikes the ground. She comes out of the ground with a bunch of lightning. She charges up this big electric energy beam. It's really loud. Screen flashes bright. Strikes it.
I remember.
Yeah.
Oh my fuck.
I've replayed Final Fantasy VIII, I don't know how many times.
I have not. It's been years.
I
have it on CDs.
I have it on CD. I have it on my PSP, my PlayStation Vita. I had it on PS4. I have the original port on PC as well as the remaster.
Wait, I have the original port on PC, the one on CDs.
On PC?
Yeah.
You don't mean PlayStation 1?
Huh?
PlayStation 1.
No,
CDs.
computer.
Huh. Didn't know that had physical releases
Yeah,
for
that's
PC.
why I said CD.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know, for me, CD is computer, not PlayStation. But yeah, the actual computer version.
PlayStation had CDs as well.
Yeah.
Huh. I just never thought of them CDs because you put them in your computer and they're just like meh. But yeah, my parents went on a trip to the UK and Final Fantasy VIII had just released their PC port and you couldn't get it anywhere in South Africa. So I'm like, please buy me this. They asked, so it's like, please buy me this. And then they brought it back and it was so much fun. Yeah, Final Fantasy on PC way back when. It's 4 discs.
Yep.
And you have to
4
like
discs.
you play through the game and then you reach a point, it's like, please insert disc 2.
Man, the end of disc 1. Oh my gosh. Okay, gotta stop nerding out. But yeah, I remember. No, I can't say I remember. Pretty much every time I beat a Final Fantasy game, I'm guaranteed to cry. That's embarrassing to admit. But yeah.
Did you watch Inyana's replay Final Fantasy X? Because
No.
she's like that with Final Fantasy X.
I only know that she's streamed it like 7 times.
Yes, she really loves Final Fantasy X. Hates 10-2. Well, dislikes 10-2. Hate's a strong word.
I like 10 too.
You should watch it. It's the best
Eh.
playthrough so far.
I could just play Final Fantasy X.
If you wanted to watch content by someone else that is also Final Fantasy based and by a diehardish fan, then I think you should go watch that.
I watched Mystic play Final Fantasy VIII. The girl who does a lot of
Who?
the dungeon and
Mystic, she does the how-to dungeon guides
raid guides.
or raids. Yeah, raid guides.
For
Final Fantasy VIII.
14.
I think I've seen this girl.
Yeah, you probably have.
Yeah.
She's
Because the how to at it being a girl sounds very familiar.
yeah. She had only played Final Fantasy 14, and she was like, "Huh, I'm gonna check out Final Fantasy 8," and she loved it, which makes me happy.
Would you still suggest playing 7?
I personally dislike 7 a lot, but that's just because of my own personal taste. I still do think that people should play Final Fantasy 7. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if
It,
I'd like
it was
it
a buggy
either.
mess, but it was still a good game.
Is it good for
I
the lore? Because like I also am afraid to replay 8 because I just know that I've been spoiled by better games.
I could replay 8 any day of the week. I replay Final Fantasy 8 at least once a year. But with 7, the story is good.
The way you said good already is making like, isn't the story like really good?
That's a personal taste thing. But my problem with the store with Final Fantasy 7 is there's mini games galore and pretty much none of them are good. It's obnoxious how many mini games there are in Final Fantasy 7. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, they're mostly optional though.
No, a lot of them are not optional.
A lot of them.
A lot of them.
'Cause I remember I think it was maybe a downhill skiing or something like that.
I'll be
I
right
don't
back.
remember others being mandatory.
The only mini games that are optional are the gold saucer ones, and the skiing one is a gold saucer mini game. But like, you're on a bike, mandatory. Squats, that's mandatory. Let's see.
Uh,
Oh gosh, there's that bit where you have to. I think before you get to the gold saucer, you're like going up the ruins of like a railroad or something like that. Mandatory. The slap fight between Tifa and the Scarlet, that's mandatory. The dolphin jumping minigame, oh my god, I wish I could forget that. Yeah, it's loaded to the brim with just terrible mini games that you have to deal with.
I must have just blanked those out then.
Yeah. Also, the writing is very much dated. Like nobody talks like that anymore. So it can be kind of rough to go through. Just from like a grammar sort of standpoint. God, have the last 2 hours really been nothing but us, or mostly me, talking about Final Fantasy? Ooh, that's a big ol' yikes. But yeah, on the second, we should play Apex.
Once Ash is released.
Yeah. And that new map. That new map looks like a ton of fun.
Did you ever get your Minecraft working?
I did not. It's weird too because it worked for that first launch, but every time after that, it's going crazy.
Yeah, when is the last time you checked your hard drive integrity?
I check it very frequently because,
Okay.
yeah. But it's weird because I have Minecraft on a different hard drive than the rest of my games.
Mm.
So,
Oh yeah. What happened to Fluffy? Did he say he was going AFK?
yeah.
I wasn't listening.
Probably going to end the stream here. This has been the longest stream that I've done in a long time.
Wait, you can't end yet.
Why not?
Did you finally get your coffee?
It's busy being made. Deus Ex. We have to talk about it.
Deus Ex?
Or Deus Deus, depends how you want to.
Deus.
Is
No,
it
it's
Deus?
Deus.
Like
Yes.
Deus is in deity?
Yes, as in Deus Ex Machina.
Mm-hmm. Oh God, why did you say that out loud? I love that.
Because
Thought it
Deus
was-
Ex, the first one, was really good, but it did have a slight problem. You could kind of do everything.
Yeah.
And then, but it was still really brilliant because it was like new and brilliant. And then, which was the good one that came after that? It was like they made so many that I didn't even know about.
Human Revolution.
I think it was Human Evolution,
Yeah. It was really
where they
good.
were like, okay, we understand you like being able to do everything, but let's limit it a little bit. And then
Yeah.
you had like paths,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really good.
It was really good. I like that game a lot.
But it wasn't the same as the first Deus Ex.
No.
It was
Basically,
like good in a different kind of way.
because
but
the
still
original
definitely Deus Ex. Deus
Deus
Ex.
Ex is old.
Whatever.
The original came out in the year 2000, and Human Revolution came out on the PlayStation 3 in 2011.
Yeah,
So
that was a lot of time.
tons of it. Nobody ever thought that the new Deus Ex was going to be, or that Deus Ex was going to be good, and it was good. People liked it.
Yeah, I liked it as well. Like they had to kind of limited it because if you played the first one and then you played it again, or you just figured it out while playing, you become overpowered kind of easily.
Yeah.
Because you could, there's just no real limit on like, yeah. You could just be like the hacker and the dude and the dingus and the, you know what I mean?
Unfortunately,
the different
the
things
newest
exactly.
one, Mankind Divided, didn't do very well.
That's the
And
latest one, or is it not the latest one?
yeah, it's the latest one.
Because with Human Revolution, they're like delving into the ethics of modification.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with Mankind Divided, that started to really upset people. It's not like
No,
it was a bad game.
it
It's
was.
just that it would have easily upset people.
No. It wasn't that the story upset people. It was a bad game because Human Revolution had paths. Mankind Divided, they were like, it's open world now. And they did this thing where you could like buy experience points even though like you spend real money for experience points even though it's a single player game. Like a
That's dumb.
microtransaction. And people hated it. And they only recently took that out. So yeah. There's no more Deus Ex games.
Well, that's not true. The formula is wait 11 years. I mean, money is one thing, but time is definitely better for producing a better game.
You know, I would much rather them make a new Deus Ex than another Final Fantasy game. Did you know that these Deus Ex games were published by Square Enix? A lot of people don't.
I did. That's why we had to talk about it. I don't know. I just like the way Square Enix goes about making games. So it's like, if they decided they wanted to make another Final Fantasy, they'd be like, okay. And if they decided they wanted to, like, stop Final Fantasy and go into a new dingus, yeah, I'd be okay with that. Because they seem to know what they're doing.
You say that, but nobody is saying, man, I hope Square Enix makes another Marvel's Avengers. Or, man, I really hope that Square Enix does Guardians of the Galaxy, the game, too.
Yeah, but
Or, man, I hope we get
did they
another
make the
Tomb
previous ones of
Raider.
those games? Or are you picking random games now?
No, they did. Marvel's Avengers is developed and published by Square Enix, and so is Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, but those games also have the same problem that a lot of games in Japan have. And this is just a Japanese thing where it's like, there was a popular anime, movie, series, whatever. We must make a game to cash in on this. And it's
No,
always crap. I generally avoid every single game made after an anime or movie.
they also develop and publish the Tomb Raider games. The first Tomb Raider remake game was really
Wait,
good.
no.
Yeah.
They couldn't have made the fuck up with Tomb Raider.
Yes, they did. That was Square Enix.
Do you know what the fuck up with Tomb Raider was?
Which one?
So initially, the Tomb Raider chick was designed like she looks now, like a normal woman, right?
Wait, are we talking about the original Tomb Raider, or are we talking about the remake?
Original Tomb Raider.
Oh, she was a lot more triangular back then.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but she was
And her
designed.
name is Lara Croft, by the way.
Yeah, Lara Croft was designed to be not Angelina Jolie, normal.
Yeah.
And then the marketing department came along and were like, whoa, whoa, this won't sell. Make her Angelina Jolie, who didn't exist at the time in the way that she does, like people know her, but that's besides the point. They're like, we want Angelina Jolie. Would have probably been Pamela Anderson those days. But anyway.
Yeah, they basically said give her bigger boobs, yes.
Yeah, and make her more bimbo-like in general, kind of thing. And that might not seem to be a major fuck up, but it is kind of a major fuck up because I do find that Tomb Raider over its course has been one of the more female friendly games, regardless of that, oddly enough. If they did it properly, it would have been a better selling game in general.
I don't agree. Because all of the Tomb Raider games, so Tomb Raider 2, 3, The Last Revelation were all super successful games. Tomb Raider
Yes, with a
Chronicles.
high level of male players. If they just changed the character design, wouldn't they have been more specific, more, better? The gameplay would be the
No,
same. The character would just look different.
I don't think so. Because
Unlikely, I think.
because
You
at
think
the
it would kill the
time,
game if she had smaller boobs?
I don't think it would kill the game. I just think that it wouldn't
wouldn't
have appealed to as
wouldn't
many
have made it any
male.
better.
It wouldn't have appealed to the male audience as much, and it wouldn't have appealed to the female audience. It just
Really?
would have appealed to less people in general. Because you gotta remember, when at the time, video games really weren't being marketed towards women at all. At all, at all, at all, at all, at all. So by trying to desexualize Laura Croft, it would have just made
Well,
males
it's not like
uninterested.
desexualized, because now it's sounding a bit wrong. More like leave it at the original design rather than over sexualize.
It just wouldn't have gotten as many teenage boys into the series as it did. Kind of thing.
I don't know,
Like,
because if you think about it, it's still a really good game for what was available at the time.
sure, but I mean,
Like, who would have beat them competition-wise? No one.
but you gotta, at the time, people didn't, there was no way to, like, know that. Like, nobody, I didn't know that Tomb Raider was going to be fun just by looking at the case of the game.
Wow.
It wasn't like I could go
Actually,
look up a
most
video.
people kind of did, because before you even got to get the game, you would get like magazines, that was those days, and they would be like, oh, Tomb Raider, and all these cool things, and this cool thing, and these puzzles, and this and that.
I had demo discs for some games. Like, they had, like, an
It was
assortment of
such
different
a
game
different time.
demos. But yeah, it wasn't like I could look up a video and be like, oh man, people really like this, and this gameplay looks interesting. So it
Yeah,
was
no,
kind
we
of,
had like PC Gamer and magazines and stuff.
I think that they made the right move, because, you know, teenage boys looked at the cover and were like, whoa. And then it turned out to be an actually good game, so they took that whoa and said, hey, you guys should go check out this. Those newest games, so the first Tomb Raider remake game was pretty good. Rise of the Tomb Raider and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, hot garbage. Published and developed by Square Enix.
Oh yeah, not all the games are going to be amazing. Can't remember which one I played. I played one of the better ones, better old ones.
I played a Tomb Raider game on the Game Boy Color, and it was good. You believe that?
What? I do not remember any Tomb Raiders for Game Boy.
Yeah.
I did, but I don't think that's. I think those were made afterwards.
I think so, yeah.
Because there was a massive divide between like handheld consoles and computer at the time. So if you look it up for a lot of games that did this thing where they made console, Game Boy counts as a console.
Came out in 2001.
It's so weird if you think about it, like a PlayStation and a Game Boy are related. Especially when you think PlayStation 5 and a Game Boy are related.
Yeah,
Wow.
the Game Boy Color.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I started at Game Boy Advanced.
Oh, you
not
didn't have.
color.
I had a Game Boy. I actually had the original
shit,
Game Boy.
phone.
But yeah, Game Boy Color Tomb Raider was good. Curse of the Sword. I actually stole
What
it from
even
my
was it?
sister.
Was it like a top-down 2D thing? Or what?
It was a 2D side-scrolling thing where you could
That's scroller.
climb up and, you know, go down.
I remember a side-scrolling Turok, but never saw Tomb Raider for the Game Boy.
Mhm.
Only Tomb Raiders I played were 1 and 2, and then the one new-ish one, which is on an island.
Yeah, that was the remake, the good one.
Yeah, It was okay.
Randomly
That's about
violent
it.
at just certain points in time. Like certain death animations
Yeah,
were
that
like Mortal
like she
Kombat levels
starts
of
off
gruesome.
she starts off being so hesitant to do any harm to the poor woodland creatures, and then she ends up going on a complete massacring killing spree,
Hmm.
murdering everyone in her path grotesquely.
But
Yeah, that,
I remember messing up on that bit where they're like rapids in like a river,
right,
and
right.
getting like her head gets like violently
Uh,
impaled. Oh,
yeah,
like what
did you
in
get
the?
like an X-ray of the bones cracking or something like that?
It wasn't quite an
Or am I think,
X-ray,
or
but
maybe
like
thinking of like a Mortal Kombat type thing? Or,
yeah, it wouldn't have been out of place in a Mortal Kombat because like the camera locks in on the spike itself, and then the perspective is of her like slamming her head into it, and how it like she tries to pull herself off
right,
before. Yeah, oh god, it's terrible.
right.
I'm
Like,
back and iced coffee.
why
What did
did
I
they?
miss now?
I'm
Nothing.
talking about Tomb Raider and that how brutal the first remake was for no reason at points.
Brutal as in
Gory.
Yeah,
not difficulty.
mm-mm.
No, 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 no,
No,
no.
no,
Because
not
the
at all.
old games are actually hard.
Yeah,
I
they're a lot
remember.
easier in the later games.
I remember the puzzles being hard.
The puzzles were hard, and any like enemies were generally rare and difficult. But
Oh,
it was satisfying to finish. Wow.
mm,
I can't remember which one I played. It's the one where you had to fight Anubis. Fuck's sakes, that one fight
I think that was
is
3.
like, was it 3?
I think.
Because I kept thinking it's 3, but I'm not sure. Yeah, that one's insanely brilliant. The end fight is like next level. So it's a boss and a puzzle, and you have to do the puzzle while fighting the boss, who's attacking you doing the puzzle at the same time. And
Uh,
that's
a lot of
very cool.
Tomb Raider games have fights like that.
yeah, that sounds pretty normal. Actually.
But this is really cool.
Yeah, I don't think I played 3, so I can't relate.
Which one did you play that you liked?
I know I played 2, and I liked it a bit. I think I played 1 as well, but not very much of it.
Who is 2's endgame boss?
Uh,
Um,
it's been many years. I don't think I even finished it, to be honest.
Ah,
I,
that's sad. Then definitely
Yeah.
play 3. It is like that endgame boss was just like an experience with the puzzles and the boss fight and cinematics and this, and it was insane, and there's phases and holy shit.
it's a Tomb Raider game. Classic Tomb Raider games are good.
Yeah, but when you say you like 2 but didn't even finish it, then it's like, are you sure you liked it?
Well,
You sure it was that good?
old games
I
like
mean,
that,
3 was hard and annoying.
like you could like it and not finish it because of just being young and not being able to finish it.
Yeah, I think it was that in large amounts.
Like I was a big fan of the original Baldur's Gate, but I was like 8 at the time, and there was no way that I could comprehend D&D rule set version 4 at that age. So of course I didn't beat it. Okay, now it's time to end the stream for real. It's been 5 hours.
And then,
Alright,
And then
cheers,
sleep
cheers.
because it's
wait, he's
4.
not going away, he's just ending the stream.
No, I'm probably going to go to sleep. It's 4:43 in the morning.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Do you have anything you have to do tomorrow?
Yes.
Like that you like have to do?
Yes.
Dude,
Does it need you to sleep?
let the guy sleep, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, I'm going to sleep. There will be time for
No,
chatting
Terrace.
later.
Why can't you be on a more normal time schedule? You need to move. I
You're
hear
not
Europe's
wrong.
quite
What?
nice.
Yeah,
Anyway, thank you
actually,
for
it's
watching. The
okay.
stream is over.
Copy.
Check out the Twitter and the YouTube channel. I'm not sure when I'll be streaming next, but I hope you enjoyed watching. See you guys later. Say bye. Say bye to the chat, YouTube.
No,
Wait, who's us two?
go to hell, chat. Don't like you.
See, they love you.
Wait, is
All right.
chat saying goodbye to us? I don't see anyone saying bye.
Oh my goodness, you guys are so new
There's
to
no blue.
this.